Hi, welcome to the channel. Today's video is titled History of England 1485 to 1603, explained in 26 minutes. Wow, wow, wow. I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, are we ready? I am ready. But yeah, we're going to check this together and I love your thoughts and your contribution in the comments below. Let's dive right in.
England's journey into the Renaissance would be helmed by its most famous royal dynasty.
Okay.
These monarchs, with their personal beliefs, biases, and neuroses, would change the lives of their subjects in dramatic ways. They shaped England more than most royals ever did, and enshrined themselves as some of the most famous and infamous names in English history. In this video, we will follow England during the reign of the Tudors as court scandals, foreign invasions, and earth-shaking religious reforms changed England forever. The Winter King.
Okay.
Henry VII faced an uphill battle. Having spent most of his life in France, he had few connections in England and was more culturally French than English. He cleared the board of many potential enemies by cleverly dating his reign to the day before Bosworth, retroactively making any allies of Richard III guilty of treason, allowing him to seize their lands and titles. His weak claim to the throne proved a constant menace. Henry had to fight off two major pretenders to his throne. First, Lambert Simnel in 1487, who claimed to be a nephew of Richard III, and then Perkin Warbeck in 1491, who claims to be one of the missing princes in the Tower. Most historians agree both claimants were frauds, but they showed how tenuous Henry's reign was at the
What? I mean, if you're English, I want to hear from you. What do you think about this? This is Lambert's Simnel, right? And this is Perkin Warbeck, right? I think I'm kind of far from this. Let me bring it a bit closer. But what? What? Let me take it back a bit. Yeah.
allowing him to seize their lands and titles. His weak claim to the throne proved a constant menace. Henry had to fight off two major pretenders to his throne. First, Lambert Simnel in 1487, who claimed to be a nephew of Richard III, and then Perkin Warbeck in 1491, who claims to be one of the missing princes in the Tower. Most historians agree both claimants were frauds, but they showed how tenuous Henry's reign was at the start. In the latter case, Henry's own Chamberlain Sir William Stanley secretly conspired to help Warbeck, which earned him an execution. However, by the late 1490s,
whose execution?
things
Hold on. Whose execution?
Stanley secretly conspired to help Warbeck, which earned him an execution. However, by the late 1490s, things had settled. Henry had two sons to serve as heirs and secured England's foreign relations with strategic marriages. He married his eldest son Arthur to Catherine of Aragon, hoping to bind England and Spain through marriage into an anti-French alliance. Arthur's sudden death in 1502 came as a shock, but Henry salvaged the alliance by offering the hand of his second son and new heir, also named Henry instead. He also repaired relations with Scotland by marrying off his daughter Margaret to King James IV. Through it all, one of Henry's main aims was to fix the country's finances. This he did with meticulous care, poring over his accounts every day and carefully tracking everything he was owed. Henry redirected funds into his personal treasury to keep a close eye on things, but aside from his occasional extravagance in courtly ritual, he was something of a penny pincher. His uncompromising will to squeeze out every penny he was owed and not waste it didn't earn him love. He was quite unpopular by the time he died, but it did heal England's finances. When he died in 1509, Henry left the crown wealthier and more financially secure than it had been in decades.
The Winter King. That's quite an interesting history. And I'm believing that there'll be someone who knows about this as well, who might also have heard stories or read books that would talk about this. I would really love you to share that if you can. But yeah, let's get into onto this one, the enclosures, okay?
Enclosures. The picture for England at large was not so simple. By 1500, England's population had recovered from the effects of the Black Death. Wages and the availability of land was no longer growing as they had during the 15th century,
Okay.
and in some places they were starting to shrink. One of the hot-button issues of the age was enclosures. This was the process of a landowner buying up a large area of land and enclosing it with a hedge or fence to prevent its public use. This denial of land to the commons angered many regular Englishmen and limited their ability to farm. The end of the feudal system meant landlords no longer saw their land as a means to provide for their military obligations, but as something to be exploited for maximum profit. Therefore, many landlords were happy to evict farmers to use the land to pasture animals, especially sheep for wool. Several laws were passed under Henry VII to try tackling enclosures, but these laws had little effect. Between 1485 and 1500, for example, some 16,000 acres of land was enclosed across Northamptonshire, Warwickshire, Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire, and Berkshire, most of which went to pasture.
Wait, not
The effects of
Northamptonshire. Hold on, let's go back.
were passed under Henry VII to try tackling enclosures, but these laws had little effect. Between 1485 and 1500, for example, some 16,000 acres of land was enclosed across Northamptonshire, Warwickshire, Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire, and Berkshire, most of which went to pasture. The effects of enclosure were not felt equally everywhere. While enclosures were a non-issue in some shires, others faced huge challenges, like Leicestershire, where some 40 villages were totally enclosed and had to
Ooh.
most of which went to pasture. The effects of enclosure were not felt equally everywhere. While enclosures were a non-issue in some shires, others faced huge challenges, like Leicestershire, where some 40 villages were totally enclosed and had to be abandoned
40.
between 1485 and 1530. Managing pasturage took much less labor per acreage than farming, leading to unemployment that drove more and more rural people into the cities. Urban life was not much easier. It was common for people to work 12-hour days or more, and the average laborer would have very little of his wages left after paying for the main expenses of rent, food, drink, fuel, and clothes. However, when harvests were good and work available, the urban Englishman enjoyed a quality of life above that of any commoner before him. Life was still hard, but it was probably easier than it had been for any generations before him. This urbanization was a continual trend of the Tudor era. In London alone, the urban population rose from around 50,000 when Henry VII took power to 200,000 when Elizabeth died in 1603. Henry VIII. Life was changing in England, but few people could have expected the changes that began during the reign of Henry VIII. History knows Henry as a tyrannous glutton who tore apart the church to satisfy his lust for a woman to give him a son. At the start of his reign, at least, Henry was
This. And we are never gonna talk enough about the brutality of how of what happened in history. And let me also say this, because I think this came to mind. Because when we're talking about history, I mean the vast majority of history, the nations or countries that are most involved in history that we know of, that majorly we know and we hear of, are England, that's British, the Great Britain, where the Roman Empire, France, Spain, Norway, the Netherlands. Is Norway included? I don't think it was. Well, the Netherlands, Dutch, I think Germans as well. Um, I think these are just a few, right? Well, was there any, or is there any other one that I'm missing? Denmark, yeah. Is there also another one that I'm missing? I think these were the major party, like major parties that played a vital role, a crucial role in history, right? Because when you talk about history for so many countries, you see that these people were were involved in so many countries. And some people and this is what I always say, like for history, we have to look at history from both sides, the good and the bad. But people only look at just the bad, which to me it doesn't make sense. I get it. I get it, but it doesn't make any sense, because history happened, yeah, but today we wouldn't most of the nations you see standing strong today wouldn't have been standing strong if not for some key players or some nations influence. And I'm particularly talking about the positive, the good out of it. And when we're talking about the good, why do we only talk about the good as in reference to collective or just one person? We talk about group as in one person, and then when we talk about good as in one person, then when we talk about the bad, or when people talk about the bad or make references to bad, they make it in collective, when majority of the time the good is as a result of group. Because you need to hang around great people, like-minded people that would also help you achieve your goal, right? Just like that, you surround yourself with people that are as great minds, that have great minds as you are. While the bad majority of the time is as an influence, or is as a result of an influence from one person that would infiltrate others. Because sometimes when you continuously listen to somebody constantly telling you, oh, this is not right for you, this is not good, this is that, and they're constantly feeding into your ear, telling you reasons why something is wrong, that is all what you're listening to, and you become influenced by that. But if you hang around those type of people who keep telling you the bad things, and you also hang around people who keep telling you the good things, and you have more of that, who would you be influenced by? But yeah, so I always say, like, history, when you want to learn history, learn it from a neutral base, learn for yourself for the sake of learning, learn from a neutral base, and then weigh both outcomes. You'll notice that the good outweighs the bad, but people just take the proportion of the bad ones, and then that's it. That's it. That's how history is. Oh, because this happened, yeah, but you can't change it. What we can do is make sure that history is not repeated. The bad things that happened in history is not repeated. That's all what we should be gearing for or working towards, if we want a better future, if we want a better now.
Was nothing like this. Handsome, active, and intelligent, Henry spent his early reign basking in the wealth his father had left him.
See?
Fond of sports, music, and hunting, Henry's court was a thriving hub of Renaissance culture and royal ceremony that ranked among the finest in Europe. A devout Catholic, Henry satisfied his faith and desire for glory with wars in France and Spain. although he never achieved any great victory worth retelling. By the late 1520s, though, two serious problems had emerged. First, Henry's extravagance was depleting the crown's treasury. Secondly, Catherine of Aragon had failed to produce a son, and she was getting too old to bear him anymore. By now, the king's eyes had begun to wander to Anne Boleyn, who promised Henry an heir, if only he could marry her. In 1527, Henry failed to secure an annulment of his marriage to Catherine from the Pope, which left him furious. But Anne Boleyn was more than just a pretty face. She was a Protestant. By now, the Protestant Reformation was well underway in Europe, and it was probably Boleyn who led Henry to embrace it. Henry began appointing other Protestants to powerful positions, such as Thomas Cranmer as Archbishop of Canterbury and Thomas Cromwell as his chief minister. The sincerity of Henry's conversion has always been questioned. Did he only do it to marry Anne? Possibly. Was it a power grab?
I was about to say this. Was it a power grab? Because listen, in history, when you look at the things that happened in history, you notice that lots of things is about power, hunger, and thirst for power, land. But majority of it is about power, because they want to be the most influential person. They want to be feared, not respected, feared. And it's about power, holding power. Who has the utmost power? Oh, I've got the utmost power. You know who? So yeah.
The sincerity of Henry's conversion has always been questioned. Did he only do it to marry Anne? Possibly. Was it a power grab? Henry was hardly the first king of England to butt heads with Rome over church authority. Either way, in April 1533, Parliament declared the king the supreme authority on religious matters in England and Wales. Henceforth, the Church of England would not submit to papal authority. Ignoring the excommunication that came his way, Henry annulled his marriage with Catherine to marry Anne, who was already pregnant with what she promised would be a son, only for her to deliver him a daughter, Elizabeth. The English Reformation. For the people of England, Henry's break with Rome was mostly procedural and did not directly affect their daily lives. Worship continued under what some historians have labeled Catholicism without the Pope. More significant for England at large was the subsequent dissolution of the monasteries. Seen as bastions of papal power and a bounty of wealth and land for the cash-strapped crown, Henry ordered every monastery in England to be closed in 1536. Almost 1,000 years of English monastic tradition was ended by royal decree. The monasteries had been centers of charity and shelter for many in England. Coupled with the uncertainty from the break with Rome, as well as spiraling food prices thanks to poor harvests in 1535, a massive rebellion known as the Pilgrimage of Grace erupted in 15.
Pilgrimage of Grace. Pilgrimage of Grace. I would love to know about this too, because this would have interesting history attached to it, right? There will be
food prices thanks to poor harvests in 1535, a massive rebellion known as the Pilgrimage of Grace erupted in 1536. Described as the greatest internal threat ever posed to the Tudor dynasty, the pilgrimage was both a religious and economic protest against the consequences of Henry's government. Although they did not target the king himself. Most of their ire fell upon his chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, as a scapegoat to avoid the crime of criticizing the crown. Despite mass sympathy for the rebels, Henry refused to accept the insults to his authority. The pilgrims lacked the desire to violently oppose the crown and were mostly helpless when Henry ordered their leaders to be rounded up and executed. Concerned about further rebellion, Henry passed the Crown of Ireland Act in 1542 to formalize his title as King of Ireland, and he also tightened his grip on Wales with 2 Laws in Wales Acts that sought to simplify English administration while stamping out the use of the Welsh language in government there. Both laws came to be resented by the nations they were imposed upon, but rebellion was avoided in both nations. Aside from the monasteries, the other consequential religious change for the English people was the English Bible. English translations had existed before, but from 1539, Henry ordered a copy of the William Tyndale English translations to be placed and read aloud in every church. Opening access to the faith for the common people was one of the more popular Protestant reforms and probably helped people accept the new religious system. The later reign of Henry VIII.
Now you see exactly what we're talking about, like the brutality of events, of things that happened in history. And you see that it is as a result or a decision of made by who? One person. One person. But guess what? Did that still make it that the nation itself is wicked or is bad? Because look at it this way. Because of the quest and the thirst for power, the power mongering behavior, the land, the people are suffering. The people need help. They're crying for help. But guess what? All you care about, or all you wanted to feed in, was your ego and power. And that's the thing with history. When you read history, when you check history, when you check some of these, and for me, whenever I check videos like this, I don't just check one video. I check different videos that compare or highlight and talk about this. So you hear from different contexts, and you hear, and when they are constantly saying the same thing over and over again, or pointing lights to the same thing, and listen, you don't have to always do comparison or whatever, but at least check to compare one video or one book with another. Because some people would write or would share from their narrative or what they know or what they want to say or what they want to push. But when you hear from 2 different sides and the 2 are kind of sharing the same thing or leaning towards the same thing, you get your answer. You've got your answer. You don't even need a soothsayer to tell you that.
Back in the royal court, Anne Boleyn's time in the spotlight was
Faded.
short-lived. Henry grew tired of her, and in 1536 she was accused of adultery and incest, which earned her a spot beneath the headsman's axe. It's unlikely she'd done anything more than lose Henry's interest. Henry had already turned his attention towards Jane Seymour.
Somebody else in the picture. I've got no words. Let me take it back. Oh yeah.
Helped people accept the new religious system. The later reign of Henry VIII. Back in the royal court, Anne Boleyn's time in the spotlight was
Faded.
short-lived. Henry grew tired of her, and in 1536 she was accused of adultery and incest, which earned her a spot beneath the headsman's axe. It's unlikely she'd done anything more than lose Henry's interest. Henry had already turned his attention towards Jane Seymour, who he married less than 2 weeks after Anne's death.
Less than 2 weeks? Less than 2 weeks? Sir, 2 weeks? There's always someone new in the picture.
It was Jane who finally granted him the male heir he'd always wanted, giving birth to Prince Edward in October 1537. It was a bittersweet moment, though, as Jane died of complications from the pregnancy a few days later. She might have been the only wife who Henry still loved when the marriage ended. He would marry 3 more times, to Anne of Cleves, who he divorced 6 months after marrying her for being too ugly, to Catherine Howard, who was beheaded less than a year later for adultery, and finally Catherine Parr, an intelligent and compassionate woman who remained married to Henry until his death in 1547.
You say this. Power. 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 2 weeks. Divorced 6 months. Power.
Henry knew he would die before Edward would come of age. He appointed a 16-man regency council under the leadership of Edward Seymour, the Duke of Somerset and Edward's maternal uncle, to manage the realm until then. As Lord Protector, Somerset dominated Edward's early reign.
You see?
Edward was raised to be a devout Protestant, and his government was controlled by men of a similar mind. Unlike his father, Edward's reign saw aggressive Protestant reforms that reached down to the daily lives of English people. In line with Protestant beliefs, all images and relics in English churches were torn down, and England's chantries, which offered prayers to the departed, were also closed. The dissolution of the chantries also dissolved many related institutions, including schools, poorhouses, and hospitals, which had provided necessary support to the common people. The forcible introduction of a new Protestant Book of Common Prayer in 1549 proved to be a step too far. Edward's brief reign saw two serious rebellions. The first in Cornwall in 1549 against the Book of Common Prayer was put down with much brutality. A second erupted in the same year in Norfolk, but this time the primary complaint were the enclosures, which had been a nuisance for decades at this point. Kett's rebellion demanded royal limits on enclosures and numerous other reforms targeting abuses and exploitation relating to rents and tithes.
This Kett's rebellion. I would also love to know. I mean, I'm curious like that, but I would also love to know. Maybe if there are books, or if you know about this, maybe you can just share hints and bits and pieces. But I also do my research to this, the Pilgrim of Grace and Kett's rebellion. Yeah.
This too was put down with tremendous slaughter. This disorder reflected badly on the Lord Protector, who was soon deposed and replaced by the Duke of Northumberland. Northumberland continued to advance the Reformation with a revised prayer book and mandatory church attendance to Protestant services in 1552.
Okay.
These were sweeping changes that reached into the daily lives of regular people, but they were halted in their tracks in 1553 when King Edward fell ill and died.
He died?
This was a disaster for the Protestants, for their only heir was Edward's eldest half-sister, the devout Catholic Mary. Northumberland and the dying Edward hastily passed a law to declare his Protestant cousin, Lady Jane Grey, as his successor, but it was a pointless endeavor. Lady Jane Grey had little support, and the nation rallied towards Mary as the legitimate Tudor heir. Bloody Mary.
Okay.
On October 1st, 1553, Mary I became the first sovereign Queen of England. Mary's agenda was clear from the start: to restore Catholicism. Immediately, she rolled back her half-brother's reforms. She allowed the Catholic Mass to be celebrated again, restored icons and decorations to churches, and began to refound the monasteries her father had destroyed. Seeking to secure her foreign alliances and restore England to the Catholic fold, she announced her intention to marry King Philip II of Spain. This marriage was deeply controversial. Englishmen, both noble and commoner, hated the idea of a foreign king who might seize England for himself. In 1554, there was even a minor uprising known as Wyatt's Rebellion, which aimed to halt the marriage and oppose the Catholic Restoration, but it failed to achieve anything significant. The marriage went ahead, but not without Parliament passing strict laws limiting Philip's power. Like any monarch, Mary sought an heir, but she was already in her late 30s when she took the throne, and her husband showed little interest in staying in England. Twice Mary thought she was pregnant, and twice she was wrong.
Wow.
Mary's desperation to have an heir as an alternative to her Protestant half-sister Elizabeth was never alleviated. Mary's Catholicism dominated her reign, and, it seemed, clouded her judgment. In 1555, as part of her campaign to undo the Protestant Reformation, Mary began dispensing the ultimate punishment to Protestant heretics: burning.
You see? Again, individual. Highlight on individual. Again, when we talk about the bad, individual. When you hear about the good, you see that it's a collective group of people, and sometimes it's individual too. But you see that the bad or the good most of the time outweighs the bad, but sometimes people just project or dwell only on the bad.
300 Protestants were burned at the stake across England
Let
and
me
Wales.
hear this clearly. 300.
Reign, and, it seemed, clouded her judgment. In 1555, as part of her campaign to undo the Protestant Reformation, Mary began dispensing the ultimate punishment to Protestant heretics: burning. Around 300 Protestants were burned at the stake across England and Wales.
Wow.
Far from restoring Catholicism, the burnings horrified the populace and allowed the Protestants a martyr's death.
Ooh. Oh my God. So sorry.
Began dispensing the ultimate punishment to Protestant heretics: burning. Around 300 Protestants were burned at the stake across England and Wales. Far from restoring Catholicism, the burnings horrified the populace and allowed the Protestants a martyr's death. Most famously, Thomas Cranmer, the former Archbishop of Canterbury who had engineered Henry's divorce from Mary's mother, was burned in Oxford in 1556, making him one of the most famous martyrs in English history. It was all for naught, since Mary's Catholic counter-reformation ended with her death in 1558. What she thought was a pregnancy turned out to be cancer. Unable to secure an heir, the throne passed to Elizabeth I.
Hey.
Elizabeth I. Young, educated, and moderate, Elizabeth faced the immense task of settling England's chaotic religious affairs. Her approach was a middle way between hardline Protestantism and the trappings of old Catholicism. In the first 2 years of her reign, she passed acts of supremacy and uniformity to assert her place as head of the church and mandate the use of a revised Book of Common Prayer. In 1563, her government passed the 39 Articles to outline the beliefs of the Church of England. While more moderate than Edward's Protestantism, it was still undeniably Protestantism. But Elizabeth was more interested in stability than zealotry. She did not wish to make windows into men's souls, and so long as people outwardly conformed to the new religion, they faced no punishment for what they might believe in private. Many Catholics were...
You see that? You see that? Let me take it back. You see that? You see that? Yes, let me take it. Well done. Let me take it back. Oh, yeah.
And zealotry. She did not wish to...
on
of England. While more moderate than Edward's Protestantism, it was still undeniably Protestantism. But Elizabeth was more interested in stability than zealotry. She did not wish to make windows into men's souls, and so long as people outwardly conformed to the new religion, they faced no punishment for what they might believe in private. Many Catholics were still unhappy, and the most radical Puritan Protestants felt she didn't go far enough. She spent the rest of her reign trying to deal with these more radical fringes, passing laws restricting the activities of Catholic missionaries and appointing church officials to root out radical Puritans. Ultimately, though, her middle ground approach satisfied the majority of the population, and her reforms were the foundation of the Anglican Church that stands to this day. One thing Elizabeth refused to do, though, was marry. Probably fearing that her husband would take her power, Elizabeth never tied the knot, claiming—
She never married. She never married. Wow. And this is it. Let me just even quickly say this. Because, yeah, no matter how it is, there are some laws that will be passed that everybody or people will not agree with, no matter how it is, or no matter how nice or how good a person is. Everybody would not like some of the laws passed or what would be shared, and that's quite okay. And as long as um you how do I even put it? See, like, outwardly practice a religion, but whatever religion you practice in private, nobody freaking cares. Do it with whatever you want to do in the private. That's not anybody's business. But respect the law outside. I think that's fair. About when we talk about stability, that's fair, right? And it's not like it's imposing or forcing you, but this is the law. This is how it is. This is how we're gonna go forward because we want things to go right. And still, no matter how it is, no matter how good it is, people are still gonna have or find fault in it, and that's how life is. But she never married. Wow.
was marry. Probably fearing that her husband would take her power, Elizabeth never tied the knot, claiming to be married only to England. Despite her epithets of the Virgin Queen, she definitely had lovers. But she remained unwed, much to the frustration of Mary's widow Philip II, who tried marrying Elizabeth to resecure the English-Spanish alliance. This lack of an heir or the means to acquire one was a constant security concern, which only became grave.
Oh my God. Take it back. Sorry.
Despite her epithets of the Virgin Queen, she definitely had lovers. But she remained unwed, much to the frustration of Mary's widow Philip II, who tried marrying Elizabeth to resecure the English-Spanish alliance. This lack of an heir or the means to acquire one was a constant security concern,
said Mary's
which only
widow
became—
or Mary's widower. The woman is the widow, right? 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 Or am I missing English?
to resecure the English-Spanish alliance.
Take it back a bit.
This lack of an
She never married.
widow Philip II, who tried marrying Elizabeth to— But she remained unwed, much to the frustration of Mary's widow Philip II, who tried marrying Elizabeth to resecure the English-Spanish alliance. This lack of an heir or the means to acquire one was a constant security concern, which only became graver as Catholic Europe arrayed against her. In 1586, a Catholic plot to assassinate Elizabeth and replace her with Mary Queen of Scots, a descendant of Henry VII, was foiled, and Elizabeth had Mary executed. The execution of a Catholic monarch and potential heir was all the justification Philip needed to invade England and depose Elizabeth. Philip assembled a Spanish armada carrying tens of thousands of troops to sail against England in 1588. With the most powerful empire in the world bearing down on her, Elizabeth's days seemed numbered. But three factors saved England from defeat. First, Elizabeth herself, whose steady leadership and rousing speeches to the troops restored hope in the face of certain defeat. Secondly, and most importantly, a tremendous storm hit the Armada en route, sinking and damaging many of the ships. Finally, the quick thinking of English captains like Sir Francis Drake and John Hawkins, who sent fire ships into the battered Armada that inflicted devastating damage. Had Spain successfully landed, they probably would have won, but against all odds, England prevailed. The Elizabethan Age. The defeat of the Spanish Armada was a high point in English history. England had fended off the greatest power in the world and was embarking on its own path to claim that title. The riches of the Americas had made Spain powerful, and Elizabeth was keen to do the same. English explorers had first reached the Americas during Henry VII's reign, with the king commissioning John Cabot to conduct the first modern European exploration of the North American coast. Elizabeth intensified these exploration and colonization efforts, such as through Sir Walter Raleigh, who sailed out on her commission and named the territory of Virginia in her honor. Her reign also saw England's first attempt at an American colony at Roanoke Island in modern North Carolina, although the colony disappeared and its fate remains a mystery to this day. More consequential for England's future was her chartering of the East India Company in 1600 to manage trade in Asia. In time, the East India Company would become one of the most powerful arms of British imperialism.
Wow.
With religious stability, foreign rivals kept at bay, and English explorers entering new lands, it is no wonder that Elizabeth's reign is often seen as a golden age for England. It was a golden age felt at many levels. On a government level, Elizabeth ruled efficiently and modestly. She avoided the extravagant spending of her father, and as a result, only called Parliament to session 13 times in her 44-year reign.
Wow.
She also expanded Parliament, particularly the House of Commons, with dozens of new seats to provide opportunity for the growing gentry. Despite hostility with some Catholic powers, trade flourished, and Elizabeth passed laws to protect and expand key economic sectors like the wool trade. This wealth was funneled into a vibrant wave of artistic and architectural expression. Elizabethan England was a true Renaissance nation, where extravagant houses and dazzling works of art were more common than ever before.
Wow.
At the same time, new goods from distant lands flowed into England, like tobacco and potatoes, which were quickly available even to regular English people. All of this depended upon a thriving merchant class who were some of the biggest beneficiaries of the Tudor age. And of course, there could be no discussion of Elizabethan England's flourishing without discussing William Shakespeare. Born in Stratford-upon-Avon in 1564, Shakespeare began his career as an actor before becoming renowned as a poet and playwright. Shakespeare's extensive bibliography of plays, sonnets, and other works include many of the most famous stories in the English language. Romeo and Juliet, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Hamlet, and Macbeth, to name a few. His inventive use of idioms and rich portrayals of historical figures in his historical plays had an influence far beyond the stage. Shakespeare's popularity and influence demonstrates the thriving cultural environment of the Elizabethan age, where great artists could enjoy fame and fortune, while the masses could enrich themselves with the finest cultural productions of the era. For all of her successes, though, Elizabeth's final years were marked by economic hardship caused by lingering hostilities with Spain and an Irish rebellion in 1595. Inflation suppressed wages, especially towards the end of Elizabeth's reign, and there was a serious problem with vagrancy. The 1598 Poor Law provided for the relief and support of the poorest Englishmen, depending heavily on private philanthropy and cooperation of the parish churches to tackle the problem. This Poor Law would remain in effect until the 19th century. Elizabeth died in 1603 after an impactful 44-year reign.
44.
With no heir, the crown passed to James VI of Scotland, who became James I of England, uniting the two historic antagonists under the same crown. The Tudor age was over. But the story of religious change, global exploration, and England's rise to true power were only just beginning. If you'd like to help us keep creating and get early access to our videos, behind-the-scenes content, and other perks, consider becoming a member right here on YouTube or...
Thank you so much for this. This was quite interesting. Oh my God, over 40 minutes. Wow, this was quite interesting and an eye-opener, but I really did enjoy this and I loved this, right? I love this. But yeah, I think we've actually said everything that we wanted to say inside or in the video, but still, this is an eye opener. And I love that this went kind of in depth. And I still, why my curious self will be like, I still want to know more, right? And I wish I would see more videos that will talk about each um reign or each monarch's reign, right? I wish I would see videos or find videos like that. I would also want to research more, learn more, and understand. Yeah, that's right. And understand. Understand, yeah. Well, this was quite interesting. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Obviously, I think I would also dig more or do research more about the pilgrimage of grace or pilgrim of grace, right? And the I've forgotten the name. Oh, I remember the name earlier. Hold on. Hold on. That's supposed to be of uh head of, oh my god. How did I forget that? Fleet of something. I can't remember that. I can't remember. I can't remember. I can't remember. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my goodness. Maybe when I remember it, I'll just like add it or include it in the video. But yeah, I think I saw it. Pilgrimage of Grace, yes. And hold on. Not the English Reformation, no. I think I remember that. I remember it very well, but it just kind of escaped my mind. I think I said it in the video, but I don't know. Yes, Kels Robbins. Yes, Cat's Rebellion. Yeah, I'm gonna do my research on this to find out more. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and all that stuff. And until next time, see you in the next video.